Islam and Peacemaking, a religion tragically and repeatedly misunderstood and misconstrued. By Ryan Bussey, Mackenzie Lowe, Melissa Marr, Margaret Shin, and Elise Sheldon. Upon inspection, one can see that Islam is a religion of peace. We could start with the word Islam itself, which is derived from the word salam, an Arabic word that can also be used to stand for peace and safety. As for the word Islam alone, it means to submit or surrender, and for Muslims this submission is to Allah. This shows that to Muslims peace is more than an absence of war in the world, but rather it is the presence of divine guidance and human responsibility in their lives. This divine guidance leads Muslims to follow in the way of the Prophet Muhammad, who is said to be the ultimate peacemaker in Islam. In following Muhammad, they will begin to find peace through the practices of their religion, including taking part in the 5 pillars of Islam. Much is also said about peace in the Quran, which we will look at next. We found the major focuses of the Quran to be coexistence, cultural diversity, and forgiveness. Through these 3 things, a reversal of conflict can then be reached. This is very pertinent in today's world, as we also see in the Quran how it hints to the fact that those who are extremists are not actually true followers of Allah. This is shown in how the actions of extremists deny the peace and tranquility promoted by the Quran, and can lead to chaos. From this we see that if chaos is able to be created, then only disruption can come of it. This disruption will then lead to a society that cannot function, as we are not truly able to grow without peace. Peace is found for many Muslims in the Quran as well as in the Hadith. The Hadith is read to accompany the Quran as it presents the Muslims with stories and sayings from Muhammad. They then study the Hadith in search of ways to emulate Muhammad's actions in hopes of becoming a peaceful individual in the way of Islam. In our research, we came across some verses that may be included in the scriptural studies of Muslims. Peace is evident from the very first line of the Quran, in which it begins, "In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful." After the initial acknowledgement of peace found in the mercy of Allah, we found 2 verses in chapter 2 to go along with this. The first is verse 190, which says, "Fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress limits, for Allah loves not transgressors." Here the Muslims are being told that while taking up arms is not forbidden, it is necessary that it only occur in order to defend against those who are in opposition of the true faith, and not to be motivated by some form of material interest. Verse 208 then states, "O you who believe, enter absolutely into peace. Do not follow in the footsteps of Satan. He is an outright enemy to you," teaching the Muslims that peace is the ultimate defense against Satan. Then we moved to chapter 60 and found verse 8 speaking to how Allah wants all Muslims to show kindness and deal justly with all, even the worst of their enemies. Lastly, to supplement the Quran, we look to Hadith, and in Al-Muwatta, chapter 47, verse 12, in which Muhammad says a strong person is the one who contains himself when he is angry. This was Muhammad's response to a man who asked Muhammad for some words of wisdom to live by, attesting once more to the importance of peace in Islam. Many Muslims work to find this peace through the practices of their daily life. Our first practice here is something that is part of the lives of all Muslims. That is the 5 pillars of Islam. These pillars are an integral part to their lives. The pillars are made up of Shahada, which is the declaration of the Muslims attesting to Allah being their one true God. Then comes Salat, calling for prayer 5 times daily in the direction of Mecca. Next is Zakat, which is the charitable giving of 2.5% of your total assets to the poor and needy. Then they will take part in the fasting of Psalm and the call for a pilgrimage to Mecca, Hajj, at least once in their lifetime. As they go through with the 5 pillars, the Muslims find support in Sharia. Sharia is a law that provides guidelines and requirements for interactions between humans and God, as well as humans with other humans. It is used by the Muslims as a form of moral guidance in their lives. Some Muslims go even further in their pursuit of peace by taking part in the practices of Sufism. In Sufism, they base their practices around simplicity. From this simplicity, their peace comes out in their motivation to act with generosity, humility, loyalty, and courage. The application of these four motives to the lives of those involved with Sufism is what we believe leads them to the lives of peace. Next, we will move from the general practices of Muslims and view some exemplary individuals in the Islamic religion. When it comes to individuals who exemplify peace in Islam, it is hard not to start with the Prophet Muhammad. He is the messenger of Allah and is viewed by Muslims as the ultimate peacemaker for the works he did in his lifetime. So through his life and the connections Muslims make to it in Hadith, Muhammad provides a goal for all Muslims as to what they should become as peacemakers. Many work to follow Muhammad's example, and we have chosen three we feel have worked to reach a high level on the way to following in his footsteps. First is Malala Yousafzai of Pakistan, who in 2012 was shot in the head by the Taliban in retaliation for her advocacy of girls' rights to education. 2 years later, she became the youngest ever winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, sharing the award with India's Kailash Satyarthi, which led the two to invite their prime ministers of their respective countries, who are traditionally hostile towards one another, to celebrate the joint win, which shined a light on the potential for less hostility between the two in the future. Another individual that stood out to us is Mirza Masroor Ahmadhu, who is the fifth caliph of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. He is a worldwide spiritual and administrative head who emphasizes strengthened interfaith relationships, religious freedom, and a separation of church and state. He is well known for launching the annual National Peace Symposium in the UK so that government officials could exchange ideas on the promotion of peace. Then, in 2012, he wrote letters to the presidents of Iran, Israel, Canada, and the United States, speaking to the threat of a third world war because of the escalation in Middle Eastern tensions, showing his interest and care for finding more ways to initiate peace in the face of immense danger. One last individual a member of our group has pointed out is Dr. Godless here at UGA, who she found out is very adamant about speaking on peacemaking to his students and strives for as many as possible to gain an understanding of Islam. Much like the previous mentioned individuals, there are many groups throughout the world doing all they can to create a peaceful earth in which all regions are capable of coexisting with one another. The first of these groups is known as A Common Word. They are a group that addresses the need for peace and justice between Muslim and Christian communities. Their mission follows the proposition that the foundation for peace already exists in two commandments important to both faiths. These commandments are the love of God and the love of thy neighbor. The next group we came across is the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation. They are a part of the United Nations, and they work to unite 57 countries that identify as Muslim-majority countries. They claim to be the global voice of the Muslims working to bring their religion out of many hostile situations worldwide. The final group we have decided to focus on is Muslims for Peace, which is a grassroots campaign launched by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community that promotes peace on an individual level through closeness to God, on a global level through emphasis on justice, on a social level through charity, as well as on a socio-economic level. Each group reaches out in a slightly different way based on the power they have, which shows us all that we might not be able to work on a big scale, but there is something that each of us can do. To go along with all that we have said on the basis of creating peace, we felt it to be necessary to include a little bit about how peace came about initially in the Islamic faith. The Holy Prophet Muhammad migrated to Medina to lay the foundation of the Islamic government. He was the first ruler of Islam. Early on, he came into contact with the Jewish people, and they made an agreement called the Medina Charter. An excerpt we found from this charter said that if a quarrel were to come about over something, that they were to revert it back to the messenger of Allah Almighty, and his decision will be acceptable to everyone. Muhammad continued his peace works by building a peaceful coalition of Arab tribes through nonviolence. From this all, Islam was able to bring a degree of peace to the Arabian Peninsula by uniting warring tribes under a single religion led by a single leader, Muhammad. To follow this, we also came across a bit of knowledge about Moorish rule, which was in place from the year 711 up until 1492. Under this rule, those Christians and Jews living in Spain were able to practice their own religion, aside from being forced into the Islamic faith. We felt it was necessary to show that not only is peace and religious freedom a reachable goal worldwide, but that it is something that has already existed in earlier times. A lot of the lack of peace toward those involved with the Islamic faith can be attributed to the common misconceptions that come about over their religion and practices. One major misconception is the idea of the Quran endorsing violence, which is not true. The Quran passages that deal with violence are in the context of historic conflict, and are often followed by statements of peace. Jihadists and members of Western media who point to the Quran as a source of legitimacy grossly misquote it by taking the statements out of context. From this comes the belief that the Muslim faith is at the root of violence and jihadism in the Middle East, which is yet another fact taken out of context. Many neglect the involvement of Western governments' colonialism, support of Israel, and Middle Eastern military intervention. This issue lies not so much in the religion as it does in the context in which it is used by extremists. Then, many around the world, especially in the U.S., are beginning to feel threatened by the idea of Sharia law. This threatened feeling arises from the beliefs many Westerners have about the system that are entirely inaccurate. Sharia is meant to be a simple set of principles and practices that are divinely ordained and coincide with the 5 pillars of Islam. This is not what is seen by the opposition, though. They believe it to be a true set of legislative laws that lead Islam to be at the heart of many intense and very cruel acts degrading women and challenging human rights. After this 5-week section of the course, we feel as though we have the knowledge to oppose these beliefs, and are truly at a loss for how many wrongful accusations are made against the Islamic religion. Our newfound knowledge from these 5 weeks in class has shown us just truly how extreme the problems with Islam are in the world today. A large majority of the Islamophobia towards Islam is due to the fact that people have not taken the time to educate themselves regarding the principles of Islam. This results in Islam being misunderstood. Islam and Christianity, as well as Judaism, have more similarities than you would think, and they hold the same values as far as a peaceful lifestyle goes. One student was able to share some of her own thoughts. She said that, "I have seen a lot of prejudice against Muslims throughout my life. I jumped at the opportunity to learn about Islam because I am very familiar with Judaism and Christianity. I have defended Muslims in the past. However, I had no knowledge to back up anything. I am glad I know more about this religion and culture. If everyone just learned a little bit about their neighbors' lives, then the world would be a much better place." We all agree here that just a simple bit of knowledge for each one of us, shared with just those close to us, could cause a major difference in the world today. After learning all that we have about Islam, we feel a deeper connection with the religion itself, even if we are not practicing Muslims. We also have a newfound respect for all that this religion creates. Muslims have exhibited peacemaking in one of the most influential ways possible, by groups of like-minded Muslims. They have allowed numerous people to rally together to stand up for Islam and its principles. The following groups we listed previously have worked tirelessly to achieve the goal of Islam being understood and appreciated. Muslims also strive to commingle peacefully among Westerners. This is strong evidence that Muslims try to be peacemakers in whatever situation they face, which is why Islam is considered a peaceful religion. And from this peaceful religion, we feel we have a newfound guidance for how to live our lives and find peace in our lives every day. Thank you for taking the time to watch our slideshow, and thank you for the newfound knowledge you have for not only Islam, but all 3 religions. It is greatly appreciated.